working drummer.
Now kick it.
This is the Working Drummer Podcast, serving up perspectives, experiences, and stories from ground-level working pros. Advice, tips, and secrets on how to build a career in the music business.
Hey everyone, this is Zach Albetta, and welcome to another edition of the Working Drummer Podcast. Today's interview is with Tina Raymond, who is one of the busiest jazz drummers in Los Angeles. The LA jazz scene has really been blowing up in recent years, and Tina is very much in the middle of it. She performs in the city's top jazz clubs, including Vibrato and the Blue Whale, as well as internationally, with artists ranging from relative newcomers like Cathlene, Pineda, and John Armstrong to long-established greats like Bobby Bradford and Vinnie Golia. She's a graduate of the California Arts Institute, better known as Cal Arts, where she studied with Joe LaBarbara, who is an absolutely legendary jazz drummer and master teacher. In addition to drumming, she is a certified yoga instructor, and she has some very cool things to say about how that has affected her as a musician, mentally and physically. And she also talks about her experience as a woman in the male-dominated worlds of jazz and drumming, and how her perspective on that has recently changed. So hope you enjoy my conversation with Tina Raymond. Sometimes we start interviews with like what you're doing now, and sometimes we start at the very beginning where you're born and all that jazz. But I want to start with you, with Cal Arts.
Okay.
Because you went to graduate school there, and Cal Arts seems to me to be this enigmatic place where you can kind of do whatever the hell you want and find a master to teach you that thing.
Yeah.
So what was your experience there?
I always say that Cal Arts was like rehab for me. Coming out of my undergrad experience, which was very traditional music school based, Cal Arts was really a place where they held this space for you to create your own sound and to figure out what you want to do. And so I studied with Joe LaBarbara there, who really focused my playing and helped me develop my ideas. And with the African drum teacher, Alfred Lagzekpo, who that was particularly important for me. He reminded me that I was good at learning music and that I had an intuition for it. And I think in a normal music school, you can sometimes forget that you're actually good at what you're doing because everyone's trying to beat their information into you. So it was an incredible experience. I don't know that I would have continued playing if I hadn't have gone to Cal Arts.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. Why not?
I was just feeling very uninspired after my undergrad. I felt a little worn down, a little beaten down, not sure of what direction to go in. The perspective of the music business in a lot of music schools is you have to be able to be good at everything. You have to cover all your bases because the music business is so terrible that you just need to be able to do everything. And Cal Arts has a very different perspective in that if you're really good at what you do, you'll make it happen. You'll make it work. And I found that to be true here.
Tell people about Joe LaBarbara.
Joe's the best. Joe's the absolute best.
He is.
He's personally invested in his students' development. I feel like I have someone in my corner. And he's such a part of the history. He teaches a 2-week class on the history of Bill Evans and the music of Bill Evans, which, I mean, there's not a lot of people around still that have had firsthand experience with that. So it's really cool to hear it from someone who's actually there.
Right. And for those who don't know, Joe LaBarbara was the drummer in the last trio that Bill Evans had.
Right. Exactly.
In the year...
I don't know. I should know that. I don't.
It was in the early 80s,
Sure.
I want to say.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, it's the trio with Mark Johnson.
Right, okay.
But Joe's also a really methodical teacher. And a lot of great jazz drummers are not necessarily great teachers. That's been my experience, where they know what to give you at the right time to help you take another step forward. And Joe is always really good about giving me really specific, tangible exercises to do to take another step towards playing in a way that will be more authentically myself.
And it was interesting what you said about how Cal Arts and a teacher like Joe help people find their individual voice. And if anybody needs proof of that, go to YouTube and watch Tina Raymond play and then go to YouTube and watch Gene Coy play.
Exactly.
Both graduates.
Very different.
Both graduates of that same program, and just couldn't be more different.
Mm-hmm.
So what about your voice or your sound do you feel your time at Cal Arts helped you develop?
I think I'm a really intuitive player,
Mm-hmm.
and I think studying with Vinnie Golia and being in Vinnie's free ensembles really helped me tap into trusting that instinct
Mm-hmm.
instead of sort of going through like the history of jazz in your brain as you're playing. You're like, oh, and I should do my Philly Joe licks, and I should do my Art Blakey shuffle, and just knowing that what you're hearing in response to what you're actually hearing is valid, and you should trust it. And just in terms of confidence with that, Joe was really helpful with that. He was like, "You're really good. You should trust you're really good," and you know,
just it's okay to be you.
Yeah.
Develop that.
Yeah. Don't worry. You've got the Art Blakey thing down. You don't need to worry about it anymore. Now practice your own stuff. It's great.
So I've been watching you play since I've been in LA, and the first thing that jumped out at me was just sort of the both your demeanor behind the drums and the sound you put out, to me, is on a very even keel. It's very calm. You don't seem like a very excitable.
I get a lot of shit for that. Man, if I had $1 every time someone said you should smile when you play, which is really kind of fucked up, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like no one was going to say that to Miles Davis.
True. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's kind of weird.
So is that something you've intentionally cultivated?
No, but I think I know where it comes from. I grew up taking classical ballet, Russian method classical ballet. And in that training, you're supposed to make everything look easy. You're supposed to make everything look effortless. And performing with that in mind at such a young age, and they don't really teach you stage presence in music school. So that's just kind of been my default. I think that's where it comes from. That would be my best guess.
And how does that translate to your sound?
I don't know. I mean, I studied with this guy in my undergrad named John Von Olen, who...
In Cincinnati?
In Cincinnati.
Okay.
He was a big band drummer in the Stan Kenton Orchestra, and with Woody Herman. And his whole method of creating sound is using gravity, is using the weight of your arms and the drop of the stick to create the sound. And that's actually, I found that to be true with Alfred Lagzekpo and the way he plays. If you've seen some of those traditional African AOA drummers play, they use their shoulder blades, they use their arms, and they let the gravity move their arms from their backs. And that's my concept of sound.
What is your concept of just improvisation and interaction? Because what I was talking about earlier with your sound being very calm, there are some drummers who, for better or worse, take you on this roller coaster.
Right.
But you, like I said, your sound is on a much more even keel.
It depends on the room. Like, I think you've seen me at the Blue Whale, which is a cement box.
Right.
And I'm always very conscious of the room. I never want to make a sound that's going to hurt someone's ears. You've heard drummers like that where they hit a bunch of rim shots and you're like, oh my God, I hate you. I'm going to throw you out the window. And I'm always very conscious of that and of trying to play to support whoever else is playing. And I mean, yeah, you want to interject, but I don't want to overstate.
Yeah.
I don't know. So that's my concept.
Well, and it seems like in a lot of drummers in LA or New York are big on the overstating.
Yeah.
And it gets a lot of attention, and
Sure.
in some contexts it's appropriate. But do you feel like your rejection of that has is it a blessing and a curse? Has it helped and hindered you? Is it
probably both. I like to interact with people where they're at and kind of inspire them from where they're at in the moment, rather than this is what I do, this is my statement on your solo.
Right.
It's more of an interaction with who's ever there in the moment.
Yeah.
And I try not to think too hard about it. I try to just respond.
Yeah. That's it. That's another good point about your playing, is that it doesn't seem preconceived. because I feel like a lot of musicians, drummers or otherwise, sort of come to whatever gig they're at with a lot of baggage or an agenda.
Sure.
But you seem just very much in the moment, and the other thing about you is that you play with nothing to prove.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's awesome.
How is that something that came naturally to you, or did you have
Eventually. I think if you had heard me when I first moved here, it would have sounded like I had something to prove. I felt like I did.
Yeah.
But again, in the CalArts environment, I mean, they've made it such a nurturing space where you don't feel like you're in competition with anyone except for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that eliminates that whole like, oh, I've got to play all my licks. And,
yeah.
Because it's about creating music and it's about enjoying what you do.
I didn't know the thing about ballet about you, but what I did know about you, which I want to talk about, is your background in yoga. Mm-hmm. You're a certified instructor, right? Mm-hmm. When did you get into yoga?
The summer in between my master's degree, I had gone through a really bad breakup, and was just sad and in LA with a handful of friends who were in and out for the summer with family, and I sort of just wandered into this yoga class, and the topics the teacher was talking about of letting go and being comfortable in the space you're in, and where you are is where you need to be. It was just the right time for me to hear those things. Mm-hmm. And that summer I went almost every day and sort of tried to heal myself through that emotional just wreckage. Mm-hmm. And from there really got inspired to dig deeper. And actors are all required to take yoga. If you look at like actor courses, they all have their morning yoga class when, the musicians are going to theory class.
Right.
And I think that it should be a part of a music curriculum too. There's so many different topics that everyone needs to hear that's an artist. Mm-hmm. That's a human, really.
Yeah.
Like one of my favorite sayings is, whenever you learn something new, at first it's really awkward and you're really bad at it. Then eventually it becomes easier. Then you become a master at it. Then it becomes part of who you are, and then you're required to share it. And that's the process of learning anything new. And the first statement is so important, because there's so many times when we're bad at something and that stops us.
Yeah.
But then the middle part of that is also true, where it's like you have to persevere until you get to that point where you don't even think about it anymore. And that's what I'm constantly trying to do on the drums, is I'm not thinking. Mm-hmm. I'm just doing it. Mm-hmm. You don't have to think about your 5-stroke rolls anymore, and they just happen. Right.
There's a great quote from Peter Erskine in his book that he wrote 2 or 3 years ago, mm-hmm. When he was getting really heady playing in Weather Report, and he was overthinking and just kind of freaking out, and Jocko told him, don't think, concentrate.
Concentrate. Oh, I like that. It's
a
meditation. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what it is.
So we touched on the aspects of yoga that affect your playing mentally, as far as being in the moment and having nothing to prove, and just this moment is what it is.
Yeah.
How has it affected your playing physically?
Awareness, physical awareness. The alignment principles have been really helpful. When I was practicing for long hours, you always get lower back pain or your wrists. And just knowing some stretches to do, or just proper alignment sitting. I always try to sit with my back really straight.
Right.
But that's not just a physical thing too. Like if you think about energetics, the only way to get the energy moving through your body in the most efficient manner is if you're upright, is if you're straight. It's called the Sushumna, I think, is like the energy.
I'm suddenly conscious of this because Tina is seated on the couch in front of me, just like with her back perfectly straight, and I'm like doubled over in this weird posture. So I'm gonna fix myself now.
Well, I'm in like an eagle pose. I'm just levitating on the sofa.
For drummers who may not wander into an actual class like you did, are there any online resources for posture or for energetics, or like you said, that you would recommend?
I mean, there's a great yoga website called Yoga Glow, GLO, that has classes of varying lengths and different levels of difficulty. I'm sure you could find like a 15-minute stretch class on there. I know a lot of musicians get into Alexander technique in terms of posture. I haven't studied that personally, but I know that's helpful for a lot of people who don't actually want to do the work of a yoga class, but I still think that going to a yoga class would be the best option, to be in front of a teacher who can watch you and interact with you.
Right.
And give you some feedback.
Are you currently teaching? Or?
I'm not. I stopped teaching back in March.
You just got too busy.
I'm teaching so much music. I'm teaching music 5 days a week.
Oh, cool. At the high school?
At Los Angeles City College. And I was at Occidental College last spring. Not right now. And then Calabasas High School and Oakwood School.
Cool.
So
what is the focus of your teaching at? I mean, I'm sure the focus is different depending on which school you're at a given day. But talk about, your high school students versus your college students and what their goals are and where you want to take them.
Yeah. I mean, high school kids are such an interesting time in their life because they don't know really what they want to do yet. They don't really know who they're going to be, and they're testing the boundaries of their personalities. So as much as I'm trying to teach them technique and I'm trying to teach them musicality, I'm also trying to teach them how to be accountable for their actions, how to be dependable for their peers, and how to do the right thing, how not to cut corners. That's basically what I try to do with them, is inspire them to be the best version of themselves.
Right.
That's the goal with high school kids.
Yeah.
It's like, be a good person, and then if you're a good musician, great.
Cool.
With college kids... LACC is a city college, so it's kind of a preparatory college to then go on and go somewhere else. And so with them, I'm trying to get my students prepared for that. I want to know what they want to do, and I want to help them get there. So it's a lot of technique that they might have missed in high school, but it's also just understanding what it would mean to be a musician, what it would mean to go to a 4-year university as a percussion major versus a drum set major or a composition major.
Right. So, and that encompasses, I'm sitting next to a marimba right here. You're teaching orchestral percussion and marimba.
Yeah, everything. My class is a percussion methods class, so...
Okay.
And you can take my class up to 3 semesters. So it's like a crash course and everything, and hopefully by the 4th or 3rd time you've taken the class, you retain more of it.
Right.
It's a lot of information.
And what is going on for you lately, playing-wise?
I've been playing a lot with Bobby Bradford, a trumpet player who used to play with Ornette Coleman, and Vinnie Golia, who teaches improvisation up at Cal Arts, and he's known around the world as just one of the premier avant-garde players of our time. I'm playing with Cathlene Pineda, who's a great composer and pianist from Cal Arts. She's got a record out on Orenda Records I'm on called A Week's Time. And then she's got another record coming out this winter, and we're doing a short tour for that. We'll be at the Blue Whale. I've been playing up at Vibrato a lot with the older jazz musicians. Whenever, Pat Senator's a bass player who works there.
Right, he's kind of the resident guy.
He
books the bands.
Yeah, he played bass in Tijuana Brass, so he knew Herb Alpert through that. And
right. Herb Alpert is the owner of Vibrato.
Exactly.
So this is interesting because you play quite a bit at Blue Whale and you play quite a bit at Vibrato, and it's kind of they're kind of at opposite ends of the LA jazz spectrum.
They are and they aren't. Yeah, sure, in a jazz spectrum, but in a music spectrum, I think they're pretty close together.
True. True. But just in terms of jazz,
right.
like the clientele that they have and
That's true.
the acts that they tend to feature.
Sure.
So do you have to change very much going back and forth between those two?
No, I don't. Aside from like playing a traditional swing beat versus a straight eighth, anything. But even within the free stuff, like I'm playing a lot of straight ahead feel with Bobby. But no, I respond the same way. I might be a little bit more conscious of staying the course, of playing more consistent at vibrato. But Cathlene's music is very consistent. So,
for those of you who don't know, in LA, Vibrato is a high-end jazz club. Lots of great food in Bel Air. Typically attract an older clientele. Is that fair?
Sure. It attracts the neighborhood, so it's residents of Bel Air.
Right. Blue Whale is downtown in Little Tokyo. Lots of young people. and a lot of avant-garde jazz and experimental music happens there. And you can catch Tina at either one at any given time, it sounds like. This is kind of an obvious question, maybe a lazy question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Okay.
Drums is a very male-dominated world. Jazz is a male-dominated world. How have you navigated that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'm just going to kind of go on a tangent and it'll come back around.
Let's go for it.
I was just in Sweden for a Women in Jazz festival. And when I was invited to go, I was in many ways kind of disappointed that I was going. I was like, this is so passé. Like, we're past this. We've been acclimated. I don't think about it. It's not a problem anymore. I don't want to go and, like, you know, wave my bra in the wind. And it's just not how I feel about music. I feel like if you're good, it's not a problem. And that has, by and large, been my experience in Los Angeles, that it's not a problem. I'm very much so hired because of how I play, not because I'm a woman.
Right.
However, being in that environment was a bit of an eye-opener on how things really aren't equal. Because the jazz clubs in Sweden are government funded, they have to keep better track on the demographics of who they're employing. And only 17% of the musicians they were hiring were women. Which to them is like, oh, that's not good, we gotta do better. But to me, I'm like, hey, you did a study. Because I would say it's gotta be less. It's gotta be less in the US, and not for a lack of talented women. And even though I don't feel like that by and large is a problem for me, there have been moments where it's been a little weird. Like right when I got home, I did a gig at the Broad Stage with John Armstrong with his original project. And I'm sure the stage manager had a list of like names and instruments, and I walk in with my cymbals on my back, and he looks at me and he says, oh, you must be the singer. It's like in those moments I'm like, oh, this still really is kind of weird. But by and large, like being in LA and being in the Cal Arts community, and just the Los Angeles is a progressive city, you know, it's not really an issue, I found.
So did you think, like, when you got invited to the Women in Jazz thing in Sweden, your first reaction was like, we don't need this, we don't need a special festival to highlight women in jazz?
Sometimes when you get put in groups that are specifically women, it's a weird reason to play together. It would be like putting together a band of men with brown hair. Like, it's a strange reason. You want to play with people that you have artistic connections to. And so sometimes the music is uninspired or mediocre or just not what music's supposed to be about, because it's an artificial reason to put a band together. But it was nice to be around people that have had similar experiences and to talk about them. It was kind of like a teacher's convention, where it's like, no, you're not going to only interact with teachers, but it's nice to go and talk with people that experience the same things you do, have a similar perspective on the world, see what their solutions are, and then go back into the world and do what you do. I think I've become a bit complacent about being a woman in the music scene. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I'm introduced as, and the lovely Tina Raymond on the drum. Say that, and the lovely Bob Shepard, like, a little weird.
Well, but you are lovelier than Bob Shepard. I mean, it's...
Sure, but nobody says that about, I don't know, anybody else.
Yeah.
It's, and I've never taken offense to it, and I still don't. But there was a moment at a jam session a couple weeks ago where I think if a man was like, oh, and she's a female drummer, and I think before that conference I probably would have just let it go. And after that conference, this was after the conference, I said, why do you have to put female in front of it? Why can't you just say drummer?
Right.
And I caught him a little off guard. And then it was like a whole thing that I got really angry, which is also a weird thing about it too, because it's like if you say anything, you're rocking the boat and it makes everybody really uncomfortable.
Right.
So it's a bit of a tightrope walk.
In talking to the other women at the this, what was it called in Sweden?
Sweden Women in Jazz Festival. It's a really inspired name.
In talking to other women there, did you get the impression that your overall experience was better or worse than other women in other parts of the world?
Better.
Yeah.
I would say better. I would say I've got it pretty easy here. But in talking with women who are in school, I would say my experience was very similar, particularly with my undergrad experience, which is tough to see other young women going through that and feeling the same sort of pressures that I felt, and who knows if they'll make it out on the other end, you know?
Was your undergrad experience more drum set heavy, more percussion heavy?
Both, equal.
Okay.
I did a dual percussion performance degree in jazz studies and classical percussion.
John Von Olin taught drum set, and who taught percussion?
The percussion group Cincinnati, which was Rusty Burge, Jim Cully, and Alan Oddie.
Cool. And this was at University of Cincinnati?
Yeah.
Or okay.
Yeah.
So what about that experience left you a little bit down as you headed into grad school? Because one of the themes that we talk about a lot is the college music experience.
Yeah.
And how many different paths there are. How many different types of schools and types of programs there are.
Yeah.
So what was your undergrad experience like?
Some things were great. Some things were really great. The classical program was really fun. The teachers were really great, and I got a lot out of that program. The jazz department for me was tough because there were really only 2 or 3 women instrumentalists in the whole program, and no female teachers on faculty except for a vocal coach who was sometimes there.
Right.
And I had a drum set teacher say to me, I don't know how to teach you because you have feminine energy.
Wow.
So, and that was like my freshman year. And when you're 18 and you're trying to navigate a new city and a new life away from your family, man, I didn't know how to handle that.
Yeah.
I still don't know how to handle it. I probably just should have said, fuck off. Right? Can I say that? Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
But I was like, okay, I'll try to be more masculine. Sorry.
Yeah.
What do you say to that? And I just constantly felt like I wasn't appreciated for what I could do there. I felt like I was always, particularly in the jazz department, specifically in the jazz department, I feel like I was underestimated a lot. And whether or not it was because I was a woman or because maybe I was a bit passive at that time in my life, I don't know. I can't really believe that I was passive. It's not really in my nature.
Yeah.
But then it was like in my exit meeting, you have like a meeting with the program director before you leave, right? He sits me down, and I kid you not, all he really had to say to me was, you should really smile more when you play. I was like, really?
After 4 years?
Yeah.
Wow.
You have nothing about like, go get 'em sport.
Yeah.
You know? It was just, you should smile more when you play. You'll probably work more.
Man.
So yeah, it's disheartening to hear that when you're so passionate about something. You know, your passion gets kind of smushed.
Right. And so you were like, because of that negative experience, you were considering just leaving music?
Among other things, yeah. I mean, coming out here, I was definitely disheartened.
What made you take the leap? Because, like, I mean, something must have said inside of you, said, like, no, I got to keep doing this.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to Cal Arts. I'm going to give it another shot.
Well, the opportunity to go to Cal Arts just presented itself. It I applied, they liked me, it worked out. And even within my first semester, I was kind of unsure, but studying with Alfred Lagzekpo and being in his office and him saying, you good lady, you know, it was an awesome, it was like, oh yeah, I am, I'm really good. I needed more of that than I was getting before.
And what was your first couple of lessons with Joe like? What did he notice about your playing? Like, did he notice something initially and say, you know, you have to develop this thing. I see this in you. Yeah,
my soloing ideas. I think I was really locked into patterns and rudiments. And he was like, you need to listen to Sonny Rollins and play more like Sonny Rollins solos on the drums. Just open up your sound and play more methodically rather than just a bunch of licks. So we did a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Who were some of your influences then and now? Have they changed?
No. I would say they're pretty consistent. Mel Lewis, always. Art Blakey, always. And then modern drummers, I really love Matt Chamberlain. I really love his concept of sound and how creative he is.
Yeah.
And then obviously Joe LaBarbara and Jeff Hamilton are like my modern jazz inspirations, and Mark Ferber.
Yeah. He's amazing.
Yeah.
What's coming up for you?
Oh man, holidays are weird. It's a weird time to work.
Yeah.
Well, in January, I'm playing with Cathlene.
Mm-hmm.
And then...
And she's a pianist, composer?
She's a piano player, composer, yeah.
Okay.
She writes really beautiful music, and we have a really deep connection. We're best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so the connection between someone that you know that well playing, it's like you can read each other's minds.
Mm-hmm.
So we're doing a short tour at the end of January, and I'm pretty sure there's a Blue Whale date in there. In March, I'll be at the Washington Women in Jazz Festival.
Another Women in Jazz Festival.
I know. But it's important. I'm on board now.
Mm-hmm.
Team women.
Yeah.
And I don't know what else.
Well, as far as women in jazz go, as a woman in jazz, do you feel that there is something just inherently different in a female musician or a female jazz musician?
No, I don't. I don't. I suppose you could argue that women are more intuitive, but I've played with a lot of intuitive men, and I've played with a lot of really methodical women. So no, I don't think that that's a factor. What I will say though is that I think that there aren't enough women on stages to inspire younger generations. I think it's really powerful to see not just a stage full of women, but a stage full of mixed company. Mm-hmm. And it not be a big deal that there's a woman on the stage, that it be a natural event. And so I think any context where I can be on the stage is an important moment. And I didn't think that before I was at that previous conference. Yeah.
So you feel kind of a greater sense of responsibility, or?
I do, yeah.
And do you see more women and girls in the audience?
At times. I mean, I notice it with my students a lot. I can't tell you how many times at LACC or at Calabasas, the women students have really responded to that. I mean, my percussion ensemble over at Calabasas, I've been there 6 years. There are more girls than boys now. That's never happened. Mm-hmm. And maybe I'm being arrogant, but I think that might have something to do with me.
I'd say so. Yeah.
I'm trying to make a record. That's going to be happening.
Well, that's what's going on there.
I should talk about that.
You should talk about that.
I'm in the writing phase.
Okay.
But Orendo Records, 2016.
Cool.
Tina Raymond record.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is that gonna what instrumentation is that gonna?
I'm thinking trio. Mm-hmm. Bass, drums, tenor sax. I can't say more than that because I haven't.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting that you want to do a pianoless, guitarless trio.
Yeah, I mean there needs to be space. I think I want a lot of space on the record for me.
Yeah. Did something inspire that? Did a specific?
Yeah,
record?
I love the band Fly.
That's Mark Turner.
Mark Turner and Jeff Ballard and Larry Grenadier.
Yeah.
And also Sam Manai's record, his solo record, is that instrumentation. And I think Mark Ferber's on drums for that. And I think it's a cool way to create a modern sound, but still be able to keep a bit of traditional playing within it. Taking away the chords like that, it's just counterpoint. Yeah. So there's a lot more space, a lot more freedom.
Cool. Well, I think we did it.
Cool.
Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you. This was fun.
You can probably hear from that interview, Tina has such a calm yet confident presence behind the drums, and otherwise, it's no wonder so many artists want her to anchor their band. Since we recorded this interview, Tina has joined the faculty at the Musicians Institute in Los Angeles, so congratulations to her on that. I think the more students that can benefit from her steady hand, the better. Please visit Tina's website at tinaraymond.com, check out her playing, check out her itinerary, and be on the lookout for her debut album as a leader later this year on Orendo Records. Be sure to check out the other two podcasts that are part of the Merge Network. That's the Daniel Glass podcast and the Drummer's Resource podcast with Nick Ruffini. Those guys are putting out great interviews and info every week. And thanks as always for listening to Working Drummer. See you next time. Cheers.